Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Denton. It is vampires, and there's a host of damned souls at Pelham House.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
Well, he's dead. He can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And again tonight I'm with Mark Johnson.
Hello.
Didn't I sound happy then?
You sounded very happy then. Although, you know, you still got that little scratchy throat thing going there. You having allergies?
No.
You having allergies?
I don't know. I got prickly heat in the sun the other day. Do you know the weather has been absolutely haywire here? Okay. 2 days ago, I was sitting out there with just a little T-shirt on, and that's about it, really. Just a little T-shirt on. And I got burnt on the top of my head, around my forehead. I got all red on there. So I was sitting out there reading a book. Today it's been snowing.
Snowing.
Yes. I'll make that out. It was beautiful yesterday. It was beautiful the day before. It was beautiful the day before that. Today we have snow.
Yeah, Mother Nature is going through menopause.
Oh, I think something's going on. Hail. We've also had hail today, but we've had quite a few snow showers.
Huh.
You have to excuse me, everybody. I've got a very scratchy voice tonight. I don't know what it is. But like I was saying, you're talking about allergies. I got prickly heat.
Wow.
Sitting out there the other day on my arms, and oh, God, it's horrible, you know? I've tried everything, even putting vinegar on them, but I smelled like a fish and chip shop, so I gave up that idea. Or pickled onion, should I say.
Well, it's that time of year I can go outside and the sunshine feels so nice and warm, and then a little breeze hit and it's cold. It's like, oh, come on, make up your mind.
Well, apparently today's weather here is coming down from Scandinavia, so it's an easterly or something.
All that Viking weather.
I don't know what it'll be tomorrow.
All that Viking weather.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe tomorrow will be different and I'll be on the beach. Who knows? Anyway, did you get an Easter egg?
No.
I was going to say, I bet my Easter egg was bigger than yours. If you didn't get one, it definitely was, wasn't it?
I'm sure it was.
I got a big one.
I didn't get an Easter egg. I didn't even get a chocolate Easter bunny. I just ate way too much.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Don't you give each other Easter eggs at Easter?
No.
What about the children?
What children?
Well, the children get Easter eggs out there.
Yeah. Well, the only child is our niece, and she was spending Easter with her father this year, so it was just my in-laws were over.
No, I just wanted to know that Easter eggs was a tradition out there as well.
Yeah. Easter egg hunts, kids going looking in the bushes, looking for Easter eggs.
Yeah, that's what I missed this year, because usually all the grandchildren are down for the Easter egg hunt. And with COVID and everything, they've not been able to come down.
See, I have to behave myself when it comes to Easter, because I tend to, shoot my mouth off and...
Pick out. Oh,
say
sorry.
No. No, I mean, I'll remind people of things. It's like, what do rabbits and eggs have anything to do with Easter? From the religious standpoint. It's like, anybody know where that comes from? But then I know, nope.
It's a new life, aren't they?
Oh, well, it's like the same thing with Christmas and Yule, it's...
Hang on.
What? Hello?
And shut up, Lexa.
Oh.
She's telling me all about Easter. That's your fault. You were talking about it, not me.
The eavesdropping witch.
She is an eavesdropping witch, I'll tell you. And I'll unplug her in a minute.
Yeah, actually, it's probably the ghosts stepping in. It's their way of telling me to shut up and not,
Well, the point
take the piss out of people.
Mark, yeah, there's another Alexa in another part of the house. They could be talking into that and doing room to room. Could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So what is it with a chicken and a rabbit?
Well, I don't know about the chicken, but it's for
the egg and the rabbit.
The rabbits and the eggs is all pagan fertility symbols. It's a lot of old pagan rituals got incorporated into Christianity centuries ago. When they're going through and trying to convert everybody, it's like, oh, you have this festival. It's like Christmas being on December 25th, which, there's evidence that Jesus was probably born in the springtime sometime. But, hey, it coincided with the Roman holiday of Saturnalia, I think it was called, which had something with trees and gift givings and hanging ornaments and whatnot. And then also their Northern European version of Yule. All that kind of got thrown in together because it was the way that they were trying to convert everybody back then. Hey, your holiday is the same as our holiday. They mix things around a little bit. So same thing with Easter. Okay, so it all stems back to paganism. Paganism and Christianity trying to, convert the pagans. I see. But then I used to say that to my brother, who was very Christian religious, and he would get so mad at me. Yeah, I expect he would. Yeah. That's why I have to behave myself. Well, you've said it now. Yep, I did. I'll take the complaints, everybody. I'll take them. Send your hate mail to info@paukradio.com. Okay. Go on. Get on with the show. All right. Shall we introduce our guest then? Go on then. Okay. Well, our guest tonight is a 6-year veteran of the United States Air Force. He has his bachelor's degree in psychology and a law degree from Western Michigan. So he's had a long legal career in private practice. And then he was appointed an assistant attorney general for the U.S. territory of American Samoa. He also served as an assistant attorney general for the state of Vermont till he retired in 2012. But he is also a UFO experiencer, and he has written not one, but 2 books on a very interesting experience he had. The first was Incident at Devil's Den, and then the new book, which just came out, Devil's Den Reckoning. And so we want to welcome Terry Lovelace to the program. How are you tonight, Terry?
I couldn't be better, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Mark.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us.
Terry, you've got a background.
Hi, Irene.
Hello.
You've got a sunburn.
I have, well, actually. It's still there as well. Yeah, you certainly got a background.
Well, thank you.
So you were in the Air Force?
I was for 6 years, from 73 when I got out of high school to 1979 when my enlistment ended.
Yeah?
No.
What was that like? Sorry, Mark.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering what it was like for you in the Air Force. Was it very restricting? Or did you have to behave yourself?
I had to behave myself. But I'm pretty well behaved by nature anyway.
Are you?
Yeah. I try to be a nonconformist, but in the military, you kind of got to be a conformist.
Yeah.
But it was fine. It was fine. I enjoyed what I did. I was a medic, an EMT, a first responder. I liked the work. It was fun.
Oh,
it wasn't what I wanted to do for a lifetime, but it was fun for 6 years.
Yeah. And you traveled?
No, didn't. I got stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base, and they never shipped me out. I stayed there for the entire 6 years.
Now, was this during Vietnam?
He got to know everybody then.
Was this during the Vietnam era or afterwards?
Vietnam era wound down in 1973. As I was going in, the Vietnam era was pretty much done.
Oh, good.
There was still some evacuation from Saigon and that stuff, but it was all winding down.
Well, your book, Incident at Devil's Den, actually a majority of the story takes place while you were in the military. So I was wondering if we could, because we definitely want to talk about both books, because there's different aspects to each of them. But the first book was about your main experience. So, we could talk about that at a high level. Of course, we want people to buy and read the book, so we don't have to tell them everything. But tell us a little bit about what happened to you.
Sure. I worked the night shift with a friend of mine, Tobias. We worked together for 3 years. We were best of friends. I was 22 at the time. He was 23. We were both married and living on the base in family housing. And my friend chose to work the night shift because he was just infatuated with watching the night sky. He could point out, different constellations and time when a satellite would come over. And in 1977, there weren't all that many satellites. But we were at a SAC base that had nuclear-armed B-52s and Minuteman II ICBM missiles spread out all over the countryside, because it was a remote area back then. And it's still a nuclear base. It's home to the B-2 bombers now. Anyway, I digress. My friend came up to me one night and said, "Hey, man, I got an idea. Let's go camping." And I knew that I had never been camping, and I strongly suspected that he had never been camping. And so I'm suspicious, and I'm like, well, what gave you this idea? And he actually had a pretty good argument. He's like, I found this place called Devil's Den State Park, and we can go down there and there's no light pollution. I can watch the sky, and you could take your camera and take pictures of wildlife, because photography was my hobby, but you can't use a camera much when you live on a nuclear base. So we thought it'd be a good idea. It was a long drive, a 6.5-hour drive. We had parks all around us. But he made a good point, and that is, sometimes the journey is half the fun. And he was kind of right. It was a fun road trip. So we went down in June of, we had a long weekend, and we went down in June of 1977. It was a 6.5-hour drive just across the Arkansas border from Missouri. And we found the entrance to the park, and we had agreed that we wouldn't stay in the campsite, because the campgrounds, we would have people to the right of us, people to the left of us. There'd be light pollution, so my friend couldn't watch the night sky in the way he wanted to. And there wouldn't be much to photograph. And so we decided we were going to be, we'd never been camping before, but we decided we were going to be real outdoorsmen. We're going to find our own place and, set up a tent and make a camp out of it. So we did.
Sorry, Terry, did you go very far from the campsite to do this?
We did. We went several miles from the campsite. What we did was we found a paved road that turned into a gravel road, that turned into a dirt road, and we eventually came to a very sternly worded sign and a chain across the road. And the sign was, keep out, do not enter, no hunting, no hiking, no fishing, no hunting, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we thought maybe it was a nature preserve of some kind. So we knew we weren't going to leave a mess or burn the forest down or anything. So we thought, well, what's the harm? We knew we were trespassing, but we didn't think it was that big a deal. And my friend noted that from his passenger side of the car, he could see that the chain had just been looped and locked with a padlock to form like a noose, and it was draped over the opposing post on a nail.
That's a lot of good, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, maybe the Rangers are a little lazy, and, you got to hunt for the keys and stuff. So, yeah, So my friend says, "Hey, I got this." He hops out of the car, goes over and picks up the chain and drops it to the ground. And we drove in, and we were just like, woohoo, we thought we were real outdoorsmen. And we drove, and my friend made all the calls. He was always the navigator whenever we drove. because he had an unerring sense of direction, which I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And we stumbled upon, and you can't see it. There's a plateau, a flat top plateau. Well, all plateaus, I guess, are flat top. But a sizable triangular shape from space, from overhead view, plateau in the middle of the forest. And the top of the plateau was level with the top of the trees of the forest. So you really couldn't see the thing until you were right up on it. And there was a dirt road that took us up to the top. And as we crested the top of that hill, this beautiful meadow opened up in front of us. And it wasn't forested. There were no trees, just, maybe 6-8 inches of grass and late blooming wildflowers. And it was just nice. And and we set up a little camp, set up our tent, and we had some air mattresses, blow-up air mattresses. And we made a little campfire and, burned hot dogs and did all the fun stuff you do when you camp. And really actually had a very nice day, mostly. And about 9 o'clock that evening.
You sound like a couple of lads.
Yeah,
having a great time.
I think we were, and I often make that analogy that, I think that I went to Devil's Den in 1977 as a teenager, more or less. Yeah. And I left there as an adult. It was a transformative event. It was a big event. So much so I tend to measure my life pre-1977 and post-1977, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were sitting on our air mattresses, laying on our air mattresses, and we were just talking. And I just commented to my friend, I can see why people do this. This is nice. We had a nice little breeze, and it was just pleasant. We had fun. And we're just sitting there just talking, small talk, and I noticed that we were having trouble communicating because the noise of the crickets, the tree frogs, all the things in the forest that make noise at night were loud. And we had to raise our voice to be heard over the campfire. And that suddenly stopped. There was a lull in our conversation, and I noticed it went dead still. And that sounds cliche, I know. That sounds like out of a horror movie or something, but I swear to God, that's exactly what happened, is it went dead still. And we even lost the breeze that we had. And I got to tell you, it unnerved me, but I had no experience with the outdoors.
So everything just suddenly went quiet? Everything?
Dead quiet.
So you're in the dark now, and everything's quiet?
Yes.
Gosh.
And we're not familiar with the outdoors. And while I felt comfortable a few minutes before, but after things went quiet, I did feel unnerved. If I had been there by myself, I'd have left. But I asked my friend, is this like he's going to know? I said, is this anything to be concerned about? It's really quiet out here. And he's like, no, man. We were laughing and cutting up. We've just quieted them. They'll come back. Nothing to worry about. So I tried to, take that for what it was worth. And we continued our conversation. And a little while later, maybe 15 minutes, my friend has his head turned to the left toward the western horizon. And he's looking at something. And I'm about to ask him, hey, what are you looking at? And he asked me, hey, Terry, were those lights there before? And I knew they weren't because we were in a remote location. There were no lights anywhere. The only light we could see was in the distance to the east. There was a little bit of a glow from the campsite.
Yeah.
But we were far enough away that, there were no lights out there of any kind. So his torso was in the way, so I couldn't see. So I had to stand up and take a step back. And on the western horizon, there was this perfect little triangle of what looked like stars.
And obviously, your friend being into the stars and the sky and everything would know that they weren't stars, yes.
That's right. That's exactly right, Irene. Because that was the first thing he said. He says, those don't belong there. Those aren't natural. But they twinkled like stars.
Yeah.
So we're debating, and I asked him, do you think this is something in our atmosphere or something outside our atmosphere? And he says, no, I think it's in our atmosphere. but maybe not. Maybe above. Maybe that's why it has the twinkle. And he's kind of undecided. And while we're watching it, I thought maybe it was an airplane of some type that was headed in our direction. And until it changed course by a degree or two, it just looked stationary.
Yeah.
And while we're watching this thing, it rotated, and the 3 stars turned like they were on an axis. And it aligned the base of the triangle parallel with the horizon, and it immediately started to go up. And as it went up, I felt this flush of calm wash over my body. And I think my friend was in the same spot, because our conversation pretty much stopped. And all that feeling of uneasiness that I'd felt just seconds before was gone, and I had no fear. What I did feel was kind of disassociated or detached in some way. I felt like I was an observer, not a participant in what was going on. And our reactions were muted. We should have had some type of emotive reaction, like, oh my God, what is this? I'll race you to the car. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
But no, we didn't do that. And we sat back and just felt very satisfied watching this thing. And as we watched it, it climbed up into the sky until it reached what I call a ceiling. It reached, 10,000, 12,000 feet. It's hard to say. I have nothing to compare it to. But it reached the ceiling and then leveled off so that the plane of the triangle was parallel with the ground. And it dipped down a little bit with the apex of the triangle pointed in our direction.
Do you know, as you're saying all this, Terry, it's all going through my head like a film. I'm seeing it all happening. It's just like a film going through my head, my imagination.
Yeah, and that's the way I see it. I see it in my dreams. It's the same way. And on some level, we knew.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But you still didn't have this fear or anything. You had this calmness still. Even though it dipped a little bit, you said, at the point?
It did. And it dipped, and then it started up like a glide plane. It started a descent into our direction. And what it did is the apex, the point of the triangle, dipped down and went all the way around in a somersault-like action. And it did that twice. And I had the feeling or the sense that was done for our benefit. That was its way of telling us, look, this thing isn't out of control. It's not, it's moving with intent. It's moving with purpose.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was going to come see us. I at this point, I knew that. And we watched it level out at about 5,000 feet on the horizon, and then glide in, and it ended up about 3,000 feet over the meadow where we were camped. Luckily, we had camped off to the side by the tree line, so it wasn't directly over our heads. It was offset a bit.
Sorry, Terry. Was it very big, this craft?
It was.
Or could it have been the size of that plateau you were on?
It fit that plateau perfectly. In my book, I say that it's a city block in length on each leg of the triangle.
Yeah.
If you want to see, I don't have a photograph of it, unfortunately, but I did make a drawing contemporaneous with the event, and you can see that on terrylovelace.com.
Okay.
And there's a picture of it there, and you can see I tried to do something to show it to scale. And in the lower left-hand corner, there's 3 little images. Myself, Toby, and our little tent. Oh, I think my car is in there too, but they're very tiny compared to this thing.
Yeah.
And we didn't know it at the time because we could only see the underneath of the thing. We had no way of telling how deep it was. But it was immense. It was just absolutely immense. And, I don't understand how this thing glided in here and, parked at 3,000 feet over our heads. And why this thing wasn't seen and reported in 5 counties is a mystery to me, but it was not. And once it had stopped moving, Toby and I are sitting there watching it. I still have that calm sensation. And while we're watching this thing, from underneath and directly in the middle of the triangle, it shot down a beam of light, and it came on, like someone hit a switch. And it was strange. This was a column of visible white light, about 6 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
And it had that same quality of like a high-power searchlight that cuts through fog. You see a column of white light.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this was like, but there was no fog, of course. So it was interesting. It clicked on, and it landed in the middle of our campfire and stayed there for maybe 60 seconds. And then again, it turns off, and then immediately in its stead, there came this laser-like light. And lasers were kind of new in 1977. I'd seen them on TV, but this was the first time I ever saw one in real life.
Yeah.
And it was about the beam was about the diameter of a pencil. And it would hit a place in our campsite for a millisecond and then reappear in another spot and then reappear in another spot. So it gave the illusion or impression that it was just dancing all around the camp. But what was interesting is it struck me in the chest a couple times. I never felt a thing, but it struck my friend. It struck our tent, my car, his cooler, and his backpack. So all the things that we brought with us, all the things that weren't natural to that environment, this thing was scanning. And I had the definite impression this thing's checking us out. It's scanning us.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, it sounds like it was investigating you.
I believe it was. And that lasted maybe 3 minutes. It seemed like an eternity, but I think realistically it was probably 3 minutes. And then that shut off, and then it was just Toby and I just laying there in this silence, and the silence was like a sound booth. It was just overwhelming almost. And then the strangest thing, we transitioned from being, while I was calm and not afraid, that sensation, that emotion changed, and suddenly I was sleepy. Now, I'm 22 years old. I'm used to working a night shift. 10 o'clock at night is, morning for me. Uh-huh. And, I drove 6.5 hours, so I had the right to be tired, but I shouldn't have been sleepy. I should not have been sleepy, but I was struck with this. All I want to do is go into the tent, lay down on this air mattress, and go to sleep. And that's what I did. And my friend was ahead of me. He threw his air mattress in, fell on top of it, and he was out.
Was this thing still out there at the same time? Oh,
yeah. Yeah, that's the crazy thing, is this thing's still over this meadow, 3,000 feet. And
that's unusual, isn't it? Normally, that's unusual in itself, because normally a person wouldn't leave what they were looking at. You'd fight that sleep just to be there, and because you wouldn't feel so comfortable enough to go and lay down, would you? So it's as if something's controlling you as well.
Oh, I think this speaks to the level of influence that they have over us. I'm very much convinced of that. And my friend was already snoring softly when I threw my air mattress in, and like I say, our emotions were muted. They really were. And I didn't bother to take off my shoes or my boots. I was wearing combat boots, and that'll come into play later.
Yeah.
And I didn't take off my shirt. I just dropped on top of this mattress, and I was out. And I don't think I was asleep. I think I was unconscious. And they took us while we were in that state.
Wow.
And
wow.
We woke up it's hard to time, because both of our watches, we wore good mechanical wind-up watches, because being medical people, we needed that. It was integral to the job, so, we had good watches. Both of our watches stopped. Mine stopped at 2:40 on the nose. Toby stopped at 2:41. So, and those watches never worked again. I wish I'd saved mine, actually, because it wasn't that old. So when we woke up, I woke up to these flashing lights coming through the canvas of the tent.
Yeah.
That just really lit up the inside of that tent like crazy. There were just brilliant flashes of white and yellow, orange light. And I wake up, and and they're flashing at odd intervals. And I'm thinking, I don't have my wits about me. I'm thinking, where am I? Oh, yeah, I'm camping with Toby. That's right. And I'm trying to rationalize where these lights are coming from. And I'm thinking, these must be the overhead flashing lights of a park ranger's truck there to kick us out. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And then there was this weird noise. There was a deep, I call it a droning noise. It was very similar. If you've ever stood next to a piece of like big industrial machinery.
Oh, I know it.
Yes, you can hear that. If you feel it more in your chest, it's more.
I know, I've heard it at night. Oh, my God.
You've heard that?
I've heard something outside. Yeah. And,
it doesn't hurt your ears.
My trees were damaged as well.
Oh, my God.
But, it was a colossal noise. It was like you say, a droning. It was like, the point is, I knew whatever it was taking off, lifting off, right? But yes. Although it was like this really loud droning noise, and you knew it was taking off. You knew it was moving up into the sky. And to me, I thought it was like something like a Boeing 727 or something like that, or a jumbo jet.
Wow.
Right? But then it suddenly stopped. You don't hear it fly off into the sky, into the distance. It just went up and then stopped.
Well, that's very similar to what we experienced.
And the tops of the trees were all over the bloody place the following day. We had to pull half of them down.
Oh.
Did you flag down the UFO and tell them, they need to pay, pay for the damage?
I didn't bother getting out of bed. I didn't even bother getting out of bed. I wasn't interested in it.
Yeah, you know what? We'll talk about that more later because it's like Terry was mentioning, unusual for him to just here's a UFO hanging over your head, and then, so I'm suddenly sleepy. I think I'm going to go lay down, to completely forgetting that there's a UFO hanging over your head.
Yeah, I just couldn't be bothered, And it was a tremendous sound.
Yeah, they're good at doing that. And that's something else I'll touch base on here after we finish this part of the story. But continue, Terry.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, this droning noise I heard. I thought it was maybe a generator in the back of a park ranger's truck. But, in retrospect, that doesn't make any sense at all. But I noticed that my boots were unlaced almost all the way down. And I knew for certain I did not go to bed with them like that. One of the things they teach you in the military is to take care of your feet. And I would have either taken my boots off or I would have left them laced up, which is how I remember going to bed, with them laced fully up. Because I thought, if you leave them unlaced like that, it's a trip hazard. If you have to run for some reason, you're not going to get very far. So I was annoyed.
So it looks like they're not able to, all the intelligence they've got, and they can't tie the laces up.
Yes. Come on, give me a break. Put me back where you found me. So I sat up, and, I wasn't thinking that at all. I was thinking, boy, am I absent-minded or what? And I took my boots off, and my socks were on sideways. Now, I knew that I didn't do that. But I still don't have any fear. I just I put my socks and my boots on properly and laced them up, and these lights continue to flash. And my friend is on his knees to my left. It's a small little tent, and he's peeled back a flap of the tent on his side, and he's looking at something. And in one of these flashes of light, I could see tracks of tears down the right side of his face, because when the white light would hit, especially, that I guess the saline in his tears would fluoresce, and I could see this white streak down the side of his face. And that unnerved me. I wasn't afraid yet, but that concerned me because I couldn't imagine what would make this guy cry. And I asked him, I said, Toby, man, what is it? Is it park rangers? Who's out there? And they did the universal finger across the lips thing and said, shh, I think they're still out there. And I'm like, who's still out there? And he doesn't answer me, and I'm getting frustrated, and I get to my knees, and I peel back the flap of my tent. And I saw two things. I saw that this thing that had been 3,000 feet over the meadow some hours before, again, we had no idea what time it was. Looking back, it was about an hour before sunrise. But this thing that had been 3,000 feet over the meadow has now descended, and it's now just 30 feet over the meadow. And these lights are so bright because the lights on the point of the triangle are all flashing at odd intervals and odd colors. And that's when we really got an idea how big it was, and it was just enormous. And the second thing I saw was I think I didn't really have my wits about me totally yet. I saw what I thought were little kids. I saw maybe a dozen, maybe 15. I didn't count them. And they were paired up into twos and threes, and they were all walking around this meadow underneath this triangle thing. Now, they're a fair distance away from us, but in the flashes of light, I can see them clearly. And I'm confused, and I asked my buddy, I said, hey, Toby, man, what are these kids doing out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night? And he said, look at them, Terry, they're not human beings. Don't you remember? They took us and they hurt us. And as soon as he said that, I snapped back into reality. And I felt like we were in danger. And I was scared to death we were going to cough or sneeze or do something to draw their attention, and then maybe they'd come over to the tent. And, we didn't realize they were long done with us. They had dumped us out. And while we watched, and they were all about the same height, maybe 3 feet, 3.5 feet tall, definitely under 4 feet. Like I say, there's a fair distance away, and I can only see them during the flashes of light. And they're walking around this meadow like tourists almost. It's not like they're looking on the ground looking for something. They're just kind of walking around, and they had a very distinctive gait. They walked like their legs had been hinged to go backward maybe 2 inches with each step. So it looked like they were dragging their feet to make a step forward. It's hard to describe. It was a very unusual gait. They walked weird.
Yeah.
And while we're watching, there came another light. Another light came on from underneath this thing. Of course, now it's just 30 feet over the ground. And this was that same quality of visible white light that we saw when this thing started. But this was a column of light that I estimate this thing was 30 feet off the ground, and the column of white light was as broad as this thing was off the ground. So 30 feet, column of light 30 feet tall and 30 feet wide. And as soon as that clicked on, again, like just somebody hit a switch and it was there, all these little guys stopped and turned their heads in its direction and looked at this light. And they didn't hurry or run or rush. They just started meandering toward the light, not in a hurry. And we watched as they would step into this light in twos and threes. And it's like they were waiting their turn. And when they stepped into this light, they would pixelate out over the span of maybe 20 or 30 seconds and just be gone. And
it's crazy, isn't it? It sounds crazy, but somehow.
And we're terrified at this point.
Yeah, you must have been.
So we saw the last two disappear, and as soon as they were gone, the light shuts off. and the lights on the points of the triangle switched from multicolored to all white, and that droning noise abruptly stopped. And it's interesting, how long we'd been listening to this noise that had become, like a bass line or something.
Yeah.
So we really didn't notice it so much until we heard it turn off, and then it was real quiet again. And while we watched, we saw this thing take off, and it did not take off like a rocket ship. It just lifted up like a hot air balloon and turned maybe a little, and just the higher it went, the faster it went. And we watched it from our tent until it was 3 points of light, and then 1 point of light, and then it was gone.
So what did you do then? Did you carry on camping, or did you
we sat in that tent. We sat in that tent like two scared 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Terrified. And I told my friend, I'm not leaving this tent. All I had was a piece of canvas over my head, but I felt like it gave me cover. I felt like I had concealment. And my friend's like, no, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And I knew he was right. But I really, really would have rather just sat in the tent till daylight. And we knew it was after 2:40, but that's all that we knew. So we agreed after about 30 minutes that we would do the, 1, 2, 3, go thing.
Yeah.
And I kept my wallet and my keys, and Toby took a flashlight. I'm sure he had his wallet. And we darted for the car, got in the car, and slammed the doors. And luckily it started right up. And I asked him again for reassurance. I said, you sure you can navigate me out of here? And I won't, not break an axle. I was driving a 1966 Chevy Impala. So, this was terrain better suited for, a Range Rover or something, not for an old Impala. But he's like, yeah, I can get us out of here. I got this. And to his credit, he did. He negotiated us through some trails. And when we got back and when we passed that chain across the road, I knew we were going to be all right. I knew we were back in the right direction. And
why do you? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go
ahead, Irene.
Why do you think the watch stopped at those particular times? Do you think that's when they took you, or when they brought you back, or?
I've asked some watch people about that, and I've been told that mechanical watches can really go haywire if they're around a strong magnetic field.
I was just going to say that if they were magnetized in some way, the free-flowing mechanisms inside might lock up, because then they become magnetized to each other and stop working.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. That's exactly what I've been told. So I do wish I'd saved that, though. I'd like to have that, forensically evaluated and a diagnosis, but I didn't. And we were hurt too. I didn't explain that. Yeah, I felt thirsty. I felt thirst like I'd never known. I just wanted something to drink. I asked my friend. I said, use your flashlight, look around the car here, see if you can find something to drink. I'll drink anything as long as it ain't poison. And he looks around. He's like, no, man, there's nothing. And the second thing that we both had were I had this, like, the worst sunburn I'd ever had in my life. But I had it all over my body, which I can't account for how that would happen. The soles of my feet were burned. My scalp, under my arms, everywhere. I'm burned. And I didn't understand that. I don't understand that to this day. But and when the sun came up, I felt like I had an eyelash in each eye. And then when the sun came up, my eyes were so sensitive to the light, it felt like I had sand in them. And when we got back on base, we went to the hospital, and we were diagnosed as acutely dehydrated.
Yeah.
And with sunburn. And we had what the doctors called flash burn, which is an injury to the eye that's akin to a sunburn to the cornea of your eye. It's what an arc welder would get if they didn't wear that hood down over their face.
Oh, I see.
So, we were both hospitalized, and they separated us. We both had private rooms, but they broke us up. And the hospital commander, who I knew, and the base commander, who I knew of but never had a conversation with, and two guys in civilian clothes came into the treatment room just as they were wrapping up my examination. And the hospital commander was the only guy that spoke. And he said, and he was very formal, and he said, "Sergeant Lovelace, you're to have no contact with Sergeant Tobias." That means no conversations in person, no telephone conversations. You're not to give him anything. He's not to give you anything.
Well, that makes it sound suspicious in itself, doesn't it?
Very much. And on and on. You're not to try to communicate with him through a third party. And just on and on and on. And my wife was there, and they gave her a big white bag, and they told her to go home. And because I changed my clothes and took a cool bath when I got home. I was running a fever. And the doctor told her to go home and put my boots and my clothing and anything, rocks, souvenirs, anything that I brought back with us, he wanted in the bag. So I never saw my combat boots again, or the clothes that I wore that day. And I'm in the hospital, and this is a little bit awkward because we were members of the hospital squadron, so we knew everybody. These were our coworkers, our friends. And I will say this: that medical people do take care of their own. We were treated very well, and it was my second night there, and this is a very interesting turn of events. My night nurse came in. With some medication for me, an injection for me. And two guys in blue business suits followed her into the room. It was a guy in his 50s maybe, and then a younger guy, maybe 30s. They both wore blue business suits. They both had their jackets unbuttoned, and you could see they were wearing shoulder holsters. And I was a pretty straight kid. I really didn't have any experience with law enforcement, but you didn't need to. You could tell these guys were cops. They were police. And the older guy spoke up and said, "If that's going to sedate Sergeant Lovelace, it's going to have to wait until we've asked him some questions." And they showed her their badges. They were from the OSI, or the Office of Special Investigations.
Yeah.
The Air Force has a security police branch, and then within that security police branch, there is a Special Investigative Division called the OSI, Office of Special Investigations. So these guys were all business, and the nurse turns to leave. I didn't get my injection, and this guy, the older guy who did all the talking, was rude to her, and he said, "And shut the door on your way out."
God.
And in retrospect, looking back, I mean, I spent some time working with law enforcement as a prosecutor, so I kind of understand it was all theater. I didn't know that then, but I know that today. It was designed to intimidate me, and it did. They were very successful in intimidating me. And they pulled a chair up, one on either side of the head of my bed. And the captain, it wasn't an electric bed, it was a crank bed. He went to the foot of the bed and cranked the head of my bed up till I was seated upright. And then the older guy flips on the overhead lights, which they'd kept off for my comfort because I was so photophobic. Yeah. And as soon as he clicked on those lights, my eyes hurt. And I said, "Sir, would you mind please to turn those off? The light just is killing my eyes." And he said, and he had this weird Southern accent, and he said, "Can't work in the dark here, son. We got to see what we're doing." And I thought, nice. And then he read me my rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You kind of know the drill. You have something similar. You have the right to counsel. You have the right to remain silent, that type of thing. And he read me my rights, and that scared me. And the first thing I thought was, you know what? We didn't pour water on that campfire. I'm sure it was out. There's no way that that fire. But then I started to doubt that. I think, well, what if we burn the forest down? That would be a very big deal, And he didn't tell me what I was accused of. What happened was, and this is an assumption on my part, so I don't have any facts to back this up, but what I think happened is they found that chain across the road. The park rangers found it. And when they did, they, drove in and found our little campsite, and we left everything there. We left the tent. We left Toby's backpack with his camera in it. Yeah, that's another point, is Toby had a camera a foot away from him in his backpack. And that had his address in it at Whiteman Air Force Base. So that's how they made that connection, I think. But the thought of taking the thought of taking a photograph of this thing never crossed my mind, nor Toby's. And that's just really strange. Because
people have said that before, that they've had cameras with them and never thought to take one.
Well, I really think it points to that level of influence that they have over us.
Yeah, it could be. So what sort of questions did he ask you?
They asked me why we left the campsite intact and were we planning on going back. And then the conversation turned to an accusation where he said, "Do you boys have yourselves a little marijuana plot growing down there? Is that what this is all about?" And some might think that's comical today, but I'll tell you, in 1977, to be trespassing on the federal land, and what if by happenstance somebody was growing marijuana down there? They could hang it on us, and that would have been dishonorable discharge in a penitentiary stretch probably, and ruin all my future plans. And so that really scared me. And I said, "No, sir, we don't have marijuana. We have no marijuana." And he said, "Well, then you wouldn't mind if we took a look in your car, would you, son?" And I thought, yeah, I would mind that. But, I had the mistaken belief that if I objected to that, I'd look guilty of something. Yeah. I mean, I knew I didn't have anything contraband-wise. And he said, yeah, he says, "So let me just take a peek in your car." And he said, then we can just rule that out. You wouldn't mind that, would you? And I said, "No, I guess not." And he said, "And you know what? We can take a look at your house real quick, just to take a real quick peek inside your house." And he said, "We won't tear anything up or disturb anything. But then we can just mark down on our report that no marijuana, no contraband of any kind."
So I think the marijuana was just an excuse to be able to get into your car, into the house, without causing any suspicion. They were really looking for something else, obviously.
I agree with that. And what kind of bears that out is they cleaned my car.
Did they?
They cleaned my car. My car had never been so clean before.
Yeah, because they probably took a lot of samples, and then afterwards they stripped it all clean because if they did find anything, they didn't want to leave it. The whole thing with here's what I've always thought, and when I read your story, and I've heard of other similar stories, is they may have figured out where you guys were camping, but why were they treating you this way unless they had knowledge of what happened? And this is something that's always intrigued me and bothered me about how the military seems to know when people have had experiences and there's nobody else around. How in the hell do these guys know what happened? And that's the only reason that they were grilling you and giving you the hassle that they were, is because they already knew what had happened. Now they're trying to find out as much from you as possible about it without raising suspicions of what they knew.
You're spot on.
Could it be through the injuries, maybe? Because the injuries, this burn and everything that you had could have given it away.
But
somebody was in the know in the hospital.
But who would put two and two together? How many people come into the hospital with UFO burns?
True.
It's, and they came so quickly too. You were just got back and were in the hospital, and they come flying in.
Yes.
Like they knew everything that had happened. And, you're talking about the mental manipulation. I mean, the fact that you had a camera and you're being a photographer and you wanted to go up and take pictures. And you mentioned in the book that you forgot your camera at home.
Left it at home.
You left it at home.
On the kitchen table.
In fact,
totally out of character for me.
In fact, the whole incident of, hey, let's go camping. Okay. And neither of you have been camping before. And then you wind up leaving half of your equipment at home. And you drive, instead of to a local camping spot, you go completely out of your way, off the beaten path, up where you're not supposed to be in a private section of the forest, up on this plateau. And then it's like the thought was implanted in there before you guys even left. And all these things that you were planning just kind of went out the window because that manipulation was in place, because they didn't need you to need any of that stuff. They just wanted to get you up there as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I feel like it was like keeping an appointment. It really was. And, we weren't that inept, to leave all this stuff behind. That just wasn't us. I mean, we stocked an ambulance at the end of every shift. I mean, we were smart guys. We made a list. We knew what to bring. And, we were great on the planning. But, when it came time for the execution, the wheels just fell off of this thing. And it was just an odd event. So, and I should go back to the major. The major is talking to me, and the captain leaves. And this major, and this speaks to what you just mentioned. He shuts the door, and it's just me and this OSI agent, the older guy that did all the talking. And he kind of has this, tough guy face, and he kind of softens his affect a little bit and kind of looks normal. And he turned the light out. And I said, "Thank you, sir." And he got down right next to my ear and he whispered. And he said, "Son, I know and you two knuckleheads stumbled onto something out there. And I think you know what I'm talking about." Now, Toby and I, on our drive back, there was no conversation to speak of. There was no debriefing, no validation of what we each saw. We were just quiet. But we did make a pact that whatever happened, we would never admit that we saw, a UFO the size of a medical building, because we knew what would happen. We would have been sent for a psychological evaluation and probably discharged from the military. Bad things would flow from that. So we made that pact that we would not say anything. So when this guy asked me, he said, I think you know what I'm talking about. I didn't answer him because I really didn't know how to answer him. And he said, "Oh, yeah." He says, "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." And he said, "All I want to know is how many pictures you took of it." And, without thinking, I blurted out, "Sir, I never took a single picture of the thing." And he just smiled because he had his admission. He knew that I knew. I knew that he knew. I don't know how he knew, but he knew. And then he turns back on the tough guy face and he says, "I don't believe you." And then he left. And that was their big concern, because I had this reputation of being a photographer. A little dark room set up in my house. I think that they were under the impression that I, maybe had hidden a 36 exposure roll of black and white film photographs of this thing. God, I wish I'd had that. If I'd had that, you guys would be talking to me from I'd be on an island right now. I wouldn't be in Texas. But,
when they went to your house, was your wife there?
Scared the hell out of my poor wife. She was there.
Did they turn it upside down?
They did not. They were they were very thorough. And they took her camera. She had a little, camera for birthday parties and stuff. That nothing like. So they took her camera, and they took. I had taken some photographs of the moon because I had a nice new telephoto lens. Yeah. And while there's not much you can do with a camera, I could go in my backyard and I took some pictures of the full moon to try out this telephoto lens. And, you know, they went through my prints and they took the pictures of the moon. For what reason? Took the pictures and the matching, and there was nothing there, just the moon and the matching negatives. They took those.
Did you get any of it back?
No. Well, my wife got her camera back along with the prints developed.
Mm-hmm.
They developed a film, and they gave her back the prints and negatives and the camera. So, interesting.
This is definitely a Miss Marple job, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and there are a lot of cases and claims of the military being involved with one or more of these alien races. And, you know, Whitley Strieber in his books, and he talked about on a few of his experiences of military personnel being present during his abduction experiences. And there's the famous claim that President Eisenhower met with aliens at Muroc, which was now Edwards Air Force Base in California back in the 50s. Yeah. So there's a part of me that feels that they knew what happened to you guys because there was already a connection between the military and these beings. Whether it was communicated to them or what, I don't know, or they knew you guys were being set up because you were obviously set up before you went out there to go to that place and go to this meeting and have this experiences. And then the military, of course, is swooping in and trying to get more information because maybe, you know, they weren't privy to everything that was going on. So they were using intimidation tactics and trying to scare you. I get the impression, this is just my own impression, I could be wrong, but I get the impression that they knew damn well you didn't take any photos, but it was a way of intimidating you and scaring the hell out of you. And as long as you were scared, you were under their control.
I think I have to agree with that. I do. I have to agree with that.
Why though would they not give you back your moon photographs?
Who knows? I have no idea. But my thought at the time was they can keep them.
Yeah, but maybe there was something that you took on those photographs of the moon.
I've wondered that to this day, you know, because I didn't really take out a magnifying glass and eye them at that level. But who knows? There could have been something there that they thought was shouldn't be public. I'll never know.
Yeah.
But you know, the fact that they separated the two of us. I talked to there's a gentleman named Robert Hastings. I bet you've heard of. He wrote a book, UFOs and Nukes, about 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I spoke with him. And he's actually become a friend. I speak with him often. And he said that's very common. He says when 3 or 4 people, even 2 people or more, see something. And he says, I'm not talking about, you know, just a saucer darting across the sky. He said, I'm talking about something at a little more intimate level, like what happened to you guys. He says it's standard procedure. They break the guys up, you know, because my friend Toby, they shipped to Japan at light speed. And they transferred me out of the hospital squadron temporarily until he was gone, put me to work in a supply unit where they had no use for a medic, you know, at all. And I went there and just did busy work for 2 months until they got Toby out of off base and on his way to Japan. I saw Toby one last time, and I should share that because that was kind of telling too. And even though I had been ordered to have no contact with him, I knew that I wanted to at least say goodbye to him. I felt like I owed him that. You know, we'd been friends. Our wives were friends. You know, we worked together on our days off. You know, lots of times we'd play cards, we'd barbecue. You know, we were just friends.
Yeah.
And we both lived on base, and we only lived about 4 blocks from one another. And on the way home from the grocery store, I asked my wife, I said, stop by Toby's, will you? I'm just going to run in and say goodbye, and I'll be right out. And she's like, Terry, man, these OSI people scare me. I wouldn't do that. And I said, no, look, I'll be in there 4 minutes. That's all. Just, bear with me. And she was reluctant, but she acquiesced and pulled over. And I said, I'll be right back. And I hopped out of the car, and I ran up to the door, the same door I'd walked through 100 times before. And I did what I always did, and that was I knocked 3 times, and I opened the door because it was never locked. And I said, hey, guys, it's me. And I stepped in, and Toby's wife, Tammy, had walked past me down the hallway toward the garage door. And she turned and she gave me a very hard look, and she said, you're not supposed to be here. And now this woman and I were on very friendly terms just a few weeks before. And I said, I know that. I said, I'm not here for a confrontation. I just want to wish you guys well. I hear you're going to Japan. And Toby heard our exchange. And he came out of the bedroom and up the hallway toward me. I'm still kind of standing in the entryway, the foyer. And I was stunned. I was shocked by his appearance. Toby was one of these guys that was always meticulously groomed. I mean, his hair was always cut within regs. He always had the starched white uniform that we wore, with shoes polished, and I was kind of the slob of the duo, but he was just really, really meticulous about his appearance, even when playing volleyball or something. I don't know how he managed to do that, but when he came out of the bedroom, I was shocked because he was, his hair was sideways, he hadn't shaved, he had on a dirty T-shirt, barefoot, and blue jeans, and I thought, guy's moving. I need to cut him some slack. But what was odd was I expected that seeing him would somehow be a relief, What's the word they used? Is closure? I thought it might give me some kind of peace. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel that at all. And he looked at me, and he was about 6 inches shorter than I am. And he walked up to me, and, I felt that it would be appropriate to embrace the guy momentarily and, slap him on the back and say, best of luck. You guys are going to Japan. Send us a postcard. And
you were buddies, weren't you?
We were friends. Yeah. And instead, I held out my hand at the same time he put his out, and we kind of missed one another, and we did this inelegant kind of half handshake. And I said, I just want to wish you well and let you know it's been a pleasure to work with you. And he looked up at me, and his eyes were like bloodshot, and I could smell liquor on his breath. And it wasn't beer, it was liquor. And he was not a drinker, I'd never known the man to drink hard liquor. I'd never seen him drunk. I'd never seen him drink more than a can, maybe a can and a half of beer. So this was just unusual for him. And he looked up at me and he said, it happened, didn't it, Terry? And I said, yes, my brother, it really happened. You're not losing your mind. And he said, yeah, but why us? And that just struck me. And I said, I don't have an expletive clue. And I broke my gaze with him and looked at my shoes for a second, and I turned and I just ran out of the house. And I felt, I was shook up. I was shaking, and it wasn't what I expected. I expected it to be, like it used to be. And it wasn't. We were changed. We weren't those teenagers that went down there anymore. So
that's heartbreaking. So he went off to Japan, yeah?
He did go off to Japan, and he and his wife split up. And she left Japan. We heard about this after the fact. I got out of the military and went to school, and we were up in Michigan, and my wife got a phone call one day, and it was Toby's ex, Tammy. And she said, she told my wife the whole story, that they were separated while he was in Japan. she took the kids, and they had 2 little ones back stateside. And then they divorced. And she knew that Toby was living with his dad, in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
And not all that far from us, actually. And she said that she and her new husband drove a truck for a living, and he was going to deliver some freight to Detroit. And they said, we're going to drive, in a highway near your house. You guys want some company? And we're both like, sure, stop by. Love to see you. So we went out to dinner, and I wanted to ask 100 questions about Toby, obviously, and it was a little bit awkward because her new husband is there, and I'm sure he didn't want to discuss, her ex.
Mm-hmm.
But what I got was that he had been discharged from the military early. I don't know the status of his discharge. Afraid to shut his eyes, and that resonates with me. I had my struggles too, and I just still sleep with a light on, and I kind of understand that fear and the need to just be able to sleep. But of course, if you drink yourself into oblivion with hard liquor, that's going to take a toll on your mental and physical health, and I recognize that was an issue. Because I started drinking, a glass of wine before bed. Then it was 2, and then it was 3. And I thought, man, this is a slippery slope. I can't do this.
Yeah.
But I could see how someone that just hasn't been able to process what happened to them, I could see that would be an issue. And, I really never completely processed it. I don't think until I wrote this book and started talking about it openly, and I discovered that that I'm not unique. That there are a whole lot of people out there that had similar stories, and I've been able to process it now and have some level of peace. But it took all these years to get there.
Well, here's
he eventually became an alcoholic and passed away. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. He when I was working on a case, and I was in the law then, and I was working on a case that involved the FBI. So I met an FBI agent, and I've met several in my career, and they've always been a cut above, just very good stand-up guys and women. So I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush here. And I can't say for sure what happened, but I had this. What happened was we on Friday nights after work, a lot of times we'd meet at the pub and have a beer. Have a beer, eat some bar snacks, and kind of rehash the week. And one night we're sitting around talking, and I asked him. I said, I'm trying to find a friend of mine, and he's last I knew he was in Flint. A couple years earlier, I had his dad's phone number tucked away. And I found it, and I called his dad. And his dad said, well, Toby doesn't stay here, but I see him. And, I wonder, looking back at it, maybe he was homeless. I don't know. But I gave him my number and said, would you please have him call me? And he said he would. He knew who I was. And I never heard from him. And then a little less than a year later, around the holidays, I tried calling him back, and the number had been disconnected. And Tammy told me what happened was that Toby's dad had passed away, and Toby's family, wanted him to have the house because he was unstable in employment and housing, I guess. So they gave him the house, and he eventually lost it for non-payment of taxes. So he had a sad life. But this FBI agent said, yeah, sure, I think I can help you find your buddy, so long as he's not a fugitive, which is FBI humor, actually, because that's kind of their job, is to find fugitives. So, he laughs at his own jokes, so I laugh too. And he said, yeah, write down everything you know about the guy, every smallest detail, height, weight, description, picture if you got one, everything that you can tell me about the guy. And, you know, you work 3 years on a night shift with someone, you get to know them pretty well. And I had a lot to say, and I wrote 4 handwritten pages, and put them in an envelope and took them to his office. And he wasn't in, but I marked, you know, confidential, and gave it to his secretary. And I didn't hear from him for about 2 weeks. And then he calls me up and he says, hey, you want to meet me at the bar Friday? He said, I got some information about your buddy. And I said, yes, I would like that very much. So Friday rolls around, and I went to the bar, and he was late, which was not like him. He was always very punctual. And when he walked in the door, I could tell it was bad news, because he walked in, you know, not looking happy. And he came over and sat down, and I already had a beer there for him, and we shook hands. He says, I got very bad news for you. I'm afraid your buddy is dead. And I'm like, dead? What do you mean he's dead? How can he be dead? He's a young man. And he says, well, you know, Terry, you know, you've been around the block once or twice. You know things in life happen. And he was the victim of an automobile accident, a head-on accident that happened between here and Detroit, and he was killed. And he said, you know, my advice to you is, you know, get through it and move on with your life. So, you know, and I could have so easily picked up a phone and verified that information with the Michigan State Police. I could have done that, and I didn't. I didn't think it was necessary. So when I was writing this book in 2017, I thought, you know, I'm going to find his final resting place and maybe pay him a visit. And I found out that he didn't pass away until September 4th, 2007.
Wow.
And what year was that you were told by the fellow in the bar?
86.
So that was a cover-up as well?
All these years, we could have been hanging out together. We could have been discussing this. We could have been, yeah.
And how,
you know, I think
I
think there's a file somewhere on the federal level. There's a file somewhere that says these guys aren't supposed to hang out. You know, they're not supposed to be together. That's what I think. I really believe that. You know, 2 people that have a credible story, that each one can bolster the other story and validate the facts. Yeah. That's a pretty believable thing.
Yeah, it's all believable, yeah.
You know, two people, especially 2 credible people, you know, go on television and tell their story. And, you know, this happened to both of us. And, you know, we'll take a lie detector test, whatever you want. That would be but 2 people would be very believable. 1 person, only half as much. So
he made it. So the story was that he was hit by an automobile back in 1980 something, and it wasn't true. So how did he really die?
I don't know his exact cause of death, but he died relatively young. He died in 2004, and he was born. He was 2 years older than I. He was born in 1953. So he would have been late 50s or something.
Yeah.
I'm not a math guy, but I mean relatively young. I mean he should have been around. We should have been able to kick back and enjoy these stories, and talk about them, you know, and barbecue again and have a beer again and just you know, talk about everything that happened. That's there's nobody else that can discuss it with.
But that's assuming he would have been back to his old self. And who's to say, with the trauma that he went through and the alcoholism and whatnot, he may be a completely different person. And, you know, there's somebody that I know that I grew up with, and he was my best friend for years. But then he kind of went through a trauma, and he was a binge drinker and caused all these problems. And now it's like, I saw him last year, and he came to visit for a couple of months, and I couldn't wait to get rid of him because he was not the person that I knew. He changed and was an alcoholic, and it's just was lying, and you don't know what happens with someone when they go through that type of severe trauma, how they react to it mentally, how physically. So it's hard to say that if you would have connected, if you would have been able to, have that connection to the point where you could talk, barbecue, and hang out together.
It's a good point. And when I published Incident at Devil's Den, I put an email address in the back of the book in the epilogue. And I said, look, I'm not a doctor or a therapist, but if you've had an experience with the strange, you've seen a UFO, you think you've been abducted, and you've got a story to tell that you don't want to share to the world, tell me. I'm happy to listen, and I'll return your email. And I thought, I honestly thought when I wrote this book, I'd sell 100 copies and have 50 in a box in my garage. And, I thought I might get a dozen emails from people. And to date, and as far as April goes, I'm up to 1,600 emails from people. And people wrote to me and told me these amazing stories about what happened to them. And what I did was I did an Excel spreadsheet because I'm a kind of a data kind of guy, and I laid out and I discovered commonalities in these stories. And, I looked at them, and then I remembered I'd read Ray Fowler's book about the Allagash abduction called the Allagash 4, where there were two twins and then two other friends. The four of them went on a fishing trip off the Allagash River in Maine, and they were in a canoe and they saw a bright light and got back to their campsite, and their fire, which should have been burning like crazy, had just burned down to embers, and nobody talked about it. They didn't discuss it. And they packed up and drove home that next day. And just like Toby and I in the car, we didn't discuss it. And human nature is, two people go through some kind of traumatic, amazing thing. That's human nature to do, is to talk about it and debrief. And, my God, did you see what I saw? And there was none of that.
But I think a lot of that also has to deal with the mental manipulation. And you could even call it hypnotic suggestions. A lot of abductees who have had these experiences, they either have screen memories of events and they don't realize fully what had happened to them until they've had hypnosis, like Betty and Barney Hill. They each saw and experienced something different that they remembered until the nightmare started, and they finally went under hypnosis, and the hypnosis took away the screen memories and showed exactly what happened to both of them, but they each remembered it slightly different. And I think a lot of the screen memories are, again, it's a hypnotic suggestion. When you and Toby, after the incident, you get in the car, you don't want to talk about it, you guys kind of separated from each other, it's like everything had changed between you, and I think that was done on purpose. I think it was, and it happens to a lot of people who survive this. It's a hypnotic suggestion to forget about it, to not think about it, to, in fact, avoid talking about it altogether.
Yeah, I got letters from people who, as a family, a family 4 or 5 people, witnessed something, and they don't talk about it. This one letter I got told about an event that they saw where they all witnessed this saucer-like thing and had maybe some missing time as a group. And they went home. They were staying in a motel, and they went home on vacation. And but no one ever talked about it until 20 years later. Uncle Joe or somebody brings it up at dinner one night. And everyone just feels stunned. Nobody wants to engage in that conversation. Everyone, and what was crazy was when I sat down and wrote this book, I had this crushing feeling of guilt that I felt like I was violating some kind of fiduciary trust or some kind of telling a family secret or something. And I don't know where that came from, but that was definitely there. And I moved through that, but. It was there.
Again, I think that's part of that hypnotic suggestion to make you not want to think about it or talk about it or write about it, and they put in feelings of guilt to try to prevent that from happening. Now, there is one thing about your case, and this is the one thing that fascinates me, especially after reading your newest book, The Reckoning, and that is the fact that this wasn't a one-off experience for you. That you have been having experiences with, I don't want to use the word aliens, but these beings since you were a child.
Yes, non-human entities, I call them. But yeah, since my childhood. And as early as age 4.
And that fits into the pattern of most abductees who may remember one main incident, but if they really, either under hypnosis or other types of ways that memory can come forward, realize that they've been having experiences their whole life. Again, I'll mention Whitley Strieber, who when he wrote Communion, first talked about that night in 1985, I think it was, in December, when he had his first abduction experience. And not realizing that as time went on, that he had been having experiences since he was a child. And your experiences, and this is the one thing that puzzles me, this really puzzles me, is you've had experiences since you were a child. You've had on and off experiences with what you were calling as a child, the monkey men. They looked like they were wearing monkey masks or whatever to prevent you from being afraid. And you were taken many times, and yet you were never hurt. So have you ever stopped to think or try to figure out what was different between all of those other times and then this incident at Devil's Den? Why were you and Toby hurt so bad physically and so traumatically? I mean, I understand with the military coming in, sure didn't help things, but the sunburns, the flash burns in the eyes, the emotional trauma, why was that experience? And Toby's saying they hurt us. You guys were hurt.
That's right.
So, but you've been having experiences all your life. What changed? What was different? Have you ever figured that out?
I've thought about that for over 40 years. And a couple of things. The entity that I know is Betty, who as a child I called Sue. Betty wasn't there. I saw 3 kinds of beings. I have little flashes of memory from being aboard this ship. And understand, I've never had a clear linear memory of what happened to us, but I do have just bits and pieces. And I was angry about this. And my attitude towards them has softened somewhat over the years because I think that our injuries were collateral damage. I don't think it was intentional. Let's burn these guys. Let's mess with their eyes. I don't think that was the intent. I think that was collateral damage. And they could have very easily killed us, taken us God knows where, and done anything with us, but they didn't. And at the end of the thing, they kicked us out. I remember I woke up half conscious, not fully conscious, but half conscious next to my car. And Toby was laying there fully unconscious. And I remember thinking, they screwed up. They should have put us back in the tent where they took us. And I no sooner thought that than these little gray guys came and they dragged us and threw us into the tent, and I was unconscious again.
Now, here's another question for you. Could it have been a different type of experience because perhaps these were a completely different type of entity that you were used to dealing with? And there are a lot of people who talk about their abduction experiences where they've interacted with several different types of races. And there are some races out there that are more benevolent and some that do not have our best interests at heart. Dr. David Jacobs, he's written several books on the subject of ufology, and he's always taken the point of view that, they maybe not exactly evil, but they sure as hell, don't give two craps about us. But I also feel that depends on who you're dealing with. Now, you dealt when you were a child with these entities, and this entity, Sue, Betty, was there to interact with you and comfort you, and you weren't harmed. Then you had this other experience with the triangular craft. Now, did you, in your younger experiences, did you see a triangular craft, or did you see a different type of craft?
Never. Never saw a triangle before this. What happened was, in my background, when I was 8 years old, I was in the backyard of our house in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was playing with a bow and arrow. I was shooting arrows into a bale of hay. And this was an urban environment, And I had people, in a small little backyard, and kind of like row houses. So there were, it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon. There were people cutting grass, hanging up laundry. There were dogs and cats and kids and cars and just all the noises of the neighborhood. And I'm looking down, and I'm loading the notch of an arrow into the bowstring, and I saw this perfectly round shadow move across my feet. Now, I knew there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and I instinctively looked up. And when I looked up, I saw a saucer, and it was perfect, and it looked like it was made out of some kind of highly polished aluminum, God knows what, I don't know. And it's over my head, and it's actually wobbling just a little bit in the breeze. And I thought it was the coolest thing I ever saw. I had no fear whatsoever, and I thought that it was, the way the feeling I get when I look at a brand new Tesla or an Alfa Romero on a showroom floor. It was kind of cool in that regard. That's the best way I can explain it. And what was weird was, here I am. As soon as I laid eyes on this thing, there was a distinct auditory change. And that was it. The sounds of the neighborhood suddenly were muffled, and they sounded like I had my hands pressed against my ears. And I recall that a tingly feeling and the fine hairs on my arm. I didn't have much there at age 8, but there was some, and they stood up. And I was staring at this thing. And I had the feeling that if I would lie down on my back and look up at it, I could get a better view. And it's weird because I don't recall actually getting on the ground, but I just recall laying there in the grass and watching it. And for minutes, I guess. And then it just kind of listed to starboard to clear the power lines and the rooftops, and it shot off. And it shot off like 0 to 500 miles an hour, and it's gone. My eyes are glued to this. I jumped up, and I yelled, "Mom!" And of course, beautiful May day, the windows are open. My mother comes running out, thinking I, shot somebody with an arrow or something, and checks me for blood. And she told me to stop screaming. I don't remember screaming, but I must have been because I was hoarse for a couple of days. And I was excited. I was like, "Mom, did you see it? It was so cool." It was and the word UFO wasn't part of the lexicon yet. It was flying saucers, right?
Right.
It was a flying saucer, Mom. Did you see it? It was so cool. And she's like, "Shh, stop saying that. Stop saying that right now. You did not see a flying saucer, Terry." And she drags me inside, sets me down at the kitchen table, and says, "Now, Terry, what you saw was a jet. You know what jets are, Terry." And I said, "No, ma'am, no. I'm sorry, I did not see a jet." And I couldn't understand why they wouldn't believe me. Because, I was a really straight kid. I didn't lie, I didn't make up stories. And I did not understand why the adults wouldn't listen to me, but they wouldn't.
Nope. Especially that generation. And I've dealt with that with my mother a few times. I had some experiences when I was younger, and I try to talk to her about it. And she was just, every excuse in the book she can come up with. Oh, it's your imagination. Oh, you didn't really do that. No, she just was just in a complete and utter state of denial. And I think, again, a lot of it, people from that generation, is just they didn't grow up with it. And if it's not real, if it's not part of everyday life, they don't want to hear the strange stuff.
Right. And, it's really telling that my dad came home that night, and he came into my room to have the talk, right? And he says in a harsh voice, "Now, what's all this about flying saucers?" And I had to correct him, and I said, "No, it was singular, not plural. I only saw one." And that, I should know better. I was always correcting his grammar, and all that did was make him angry. Mm. And he said, "Now, look, you can't go around telling people you saw a flying saucer. They'll think there's something wrong with you." And then he added this. He said, "They'll think there's something wrong with us."
Yep.
And I thought, oh, yeah, now I get it. Mm-hmm. 1960s conformity. Now I get it. Yeah, I understand.
Don't be different from anybody else in the neighborhood. You don't want people gossiping.
Yeah. That's right.
Now, between what happened to you when you were younger, and then, of course, Devil's Den, and then, of course, that was back in the 70s. So now here we are in the 21st century. Have you had any more recent experiences?
I have. And I've got at least anecdotal evidence of what happened to me. And it needs just a brief explanation. Since this happened at Devil's Den, I sleep is hard to come by sometimes. And, in the 80s, I got in the habit of wearing a Sony Walkman when they first came out. And I'd listen to meditative tapes or, symphonic music or something. And it helped me to get to sleep. It masked all the normal noises of the house that would freak me out. And that's the way I slept. And I sleep that way to this day. Only now I use my iPhone. I've got heart disease, so I have to use a specially designed case to shield me from the EMF. And I wear a T-shirt to bed with a pocket. And I stuff my phone in my pocket, and I use earbuds, and I listen to meditative apps, HemiSync or binaural beats, something along those lines, and meditate a little, relax, and try to sleep. So on April 16th of 2019, I woke up at 5:55 a.m. And I woke up, I sat up in bed. I didn't notice at first, but my earbuds were on my chest, not in my ears. And my phone is firmly in my pocket, and I feel like I've run a 100-yard dash. And I'm out of breath, and I cannot get oxygen. I can't get enough. I'm just starved for oxygen. And I thought, with my history, I thought I'm having a heart attack. I didn't have any chest pain, but that was my first assumption. And my wife called 911, and they came and picked me up, took me to the hospital. And when the EMTs picked me up, paramedics, my pulse was tachycardic, like 175. My blood pressure was like 210/180. And my oxygen saturation was like at 96 instead of at 100. But by the time I got to the hospital, 15 minutes later, my vital signs had all calmed down. And I've had a couple heart attacks, so I know the drill. You go in the emergency room, they're going to do a chest x-ray, an EKG, and a blood draw to test for cardiac enzymes. And so I knew the drill, and they did all those things. And a couple hours pass, and cardiologist comes in and says, "I got your latest EKG from 6 months ago, and there's no changes. And you're negative for cardiac enzymes indicating a heart attack. Your chest x-ray is clear." He says, "I've got no reason to keep you. I'm going to kick you out and send you home." And I'm like, "Okay, that's great." So they did. And I went home, had dinner, and told my wife, I said, "I feel well enough. I'm going to go do my half-mile walk after dinner like I always do." And I walked to the I walked to the curb and I pulled up my health app because I wanted to see how many steps I'd walked during the day. I try to clock that and try to meet a minimum every day. And I saw on my phone, and there's a picture of this in the red book, The Reckoning. I've got a screenshot of the iPhone app. And if you look at it, there are two screenshots. There's one that has the number of steps for the day and the date clearly. And then it says, flights of stairs climbed, 6 flights. And I thought, 6 flights of stairs? I don't have any stairs. I mean, I live in a Texas ranch house. The only stair that I have is a 4-inch threshold you walk through. So I thought this must be an error of some kind. So I did my walk. I got home, and I looked at the app closer. And, normally when I walk a flight of stairs, like if I'm walking to a parking garage or something, there'll be like a stair step type readout because the x-axis at the bottom goes from left to right to indicate passage of time. So it would take me, a minute to climb first step and then first flight of stairs and then the second. So I'd had this stair step type readout. And of course the Y index for the vertical shows height in 10-foot increments. And I had a single red bar. If you look at that, there's one single red bar that goes straight up to 6 flights of stairs to 60 feet. And I took it to Apple, and I said, I got a malfunction with my phone. There's something wrong with the app. There's something wrong with the phone. Although because I woke up in this state, I made a connection between the two. I thought there has to be something wrong here. Mm-hmm. And the lady at the Apple store said, I'll run a diagnostic on it, come back in a couple hours, and I did. And she says, there's nothing wrong with your app, there's nothing wrong with your phone. And I said, well, what does this mean? And she says, it means that on April 16, 2019, between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m., this phone was 60 feet above your house in less than a minute.
Holy crap.
And that's in the book. And if you note the time was 5:23 to 5:24. I didn't wake up until 5:55. So at the time that I climbed these 6 flights of stairs or went 60 feet above my house, to my knowledge, I was sound asleep, in bed with my wife.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting.
That's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah. So things... Now, have you ever undergone hypnotic regression to try to find more answers?
Once. I don't know if I explained this in the book or not, but my best friend here in Dallas is a board-certified psychiatrist. And, I've never even been his patient. We're just friends. I met him at a MUFON meeting. He explained that when he was in medical school, they taught him that, people that come in and talk about aliens or being abducted were probably delusional. And that you could tie that to some type of mood disorder, behavioral disorder, psychopathy. Something is wrong. There's an underlying reason for them to have seen these things. And he's been practicing medicine for 30 years, and he's like, you know what? He says, I had people come in and tell me they think they've been abducted, and he said, then I do a full examination and evaluation, and he said, I don't find any underlying psychopathy or behavioral issues or mood issues, or he said they're sane, normal, average people. And he said, I've seen this so many times over 30 years. He said, I started going to MUFON meetings to see if I could figure out what's going on. So we became friends. And after my incident in 2019, I told him about it. And he said, well, let's regress you. And I said, I don't know if I want to do that or not. So this was 2019. And then in December of that year, 6 months later, I told him, I said, yeah, I think I'd like to know. I don't want to go back to 1977, not yet. But I would like to know what happened to me on April 16th of 2019. And he said, well, we can try, try to find out for you. And we went to, it was a Sunday, we went to his office. And and he's got a sofa in his office, like all psychiatrists, I guess. And he recorded this, and he said, "Lay down, get comfortable." And I had trouble getting under, if that makes sense. I had trouble getting into the hypnosis thing, and I think it's because I knew him well. I think it would have been maybe easier if I didn't know him, but it took a while. It took probably 30 minutes, and I finally got there. And he said, "Okay, we're going to go back to April 16th of 2019. You remember the April 16th of 2019? I said, "Yes." And I've got my eyes closed, and I'm sleepy, and I'm seeing it play out in my mind's eye. And he said, "What happened to you? Something happened to you in the morning?" And I said, "Yeah, they took me." And he said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because I could see it." I said, I was in bed, and I went up. I went straight up. I went through the ceiling, and I popped out of the roof on the other side. And it was a beautiful morning, and there were stars out still, and it was cool and crisp outside. And I went straight up, and over my head was a saucer, and the bottom of it opened like a camera lens, or an iris. The pupil, of your eye opens up. It opened up, and there was just big black void underneath the silver thing. And that's the point where we stopped the hypnosis, because we were, an hour and a half into it, and I had a spike in blood pressure because he's an MD, so he's monitoring my vital signs. And he's cautious because of my history of heart disease. And he stopped it there and said, "Well, we're going to have another session and find out what happened." And I said, "Okay, give me time and I'll be ready." And then, of course, COVID hit, and he didn't want to do anything in person, and practices psychiatry via Zoom. But you can't. He said, that hypnosis doesn't work like that. He said, I need to be there.
Right.
So we now have plans. Sometime this summer, we're going to get together and do it again, and see if we can get past that threshold and find out what happened to me inside that thing. I want to know.
I would highly recommend, at the very least, if you have a digital recorder or something, to record the incident.
He does.
Oh,
he records it all.
Good.
Video and audio.
Video and audio, excellent. Because that way it will help document. And again, I find it interesting that the craft that you experienced in this latest version is the circular saucer shape and not the triangular craft, which again, for me, I feel that what the craft that you and Toby experienced that day in 1977 was definitely not anything that you were dealing with before, which is why you had such adverse effects, and plus with the military response to it as well. Now, have you had any other, since this, let's say even after this book has come out, have you had any, God, I hate using the terms, but any threats or anybody, people talk about the Men in Black, but anybody who maybe even seemed like from the government or the military, anybody trying to come to you to say to shut up?
Nobody's told me to shut up, but I've had some very bizarre experiences. I published the book on March 10th of 2018. Mm-hmm. And in April, I got a call, and I looked at my phone, and it just said Los Angeles. And I've got friends in California, so I said, "Hi, this is Terry." And the voice on the other end said, "Well, hi, Terry, it's Tom DeLong. How are you?" And I had no idea who he was. And of course, he was with To the Stars Academy, Arts and Sciences, TTSA. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. My daughter, of course, knew, Blink 182.
Yep.
She knew right away. So she's like, get me a poster sign, get me a poster sign. And he did. He sent me a poster for my daughter. And he's like, yeah, we read your book. I've got Steve Justice here and Lou Elizondo, and we'd like to talk to you about the things in your leg. And I'm like, okay. And I still really don't know who these people are. So I did more listening than I did talking.
Actually, the three of them just last year, they did a television series. I believe it was on Travel Channel about UFOs hunting. And, what was his name, Elizondo? He used to be in the military. And
yes, DIA.
DIA, yeah.
He came to my home with a cameraman to film me. And they were going to film me through Travel Channel for an episode of the TV show. Mm-hmm. And I don't get cable I don't watch television very much, so I don't get cable. So I didn't see the show. Someone mailed me an episode. So they were supposed to film me for that in February, and we made plans. They were going to fly here, and then Travel Channel put in a travel ban on their film crews traveling because of COVID. So we never got that opportunity. But in June of 2019, after I'd had this event, some of the weird events were I had military helicopters buzzing my house. I mean, doing donuts over my house 3 times a week. You know, if you look up the March 29th, I think it is, 2019, there's an article in the Dallas Morning News back in the entertainment section or something, and it has an article that says, why are there so many military helicopters over Dallas? And then it talks in the first paragraph, why are there so many military helicopters over Garland, which is the community that I live in? And I thought, I know the answer to that because they're over my house. That's why. So Lou flew out with a cameraman with the idea they wanted to film my story, not for television, but for TTSA. And they wanted to try to get a picture of the helicopters because I told them to come between 9 and 11 a.m. Because at that time of day, when I walk out my front door, I got a big tree and the morning sun that blocks my field of view to about 180 degrees of what's in back of me. So I can hear them, but I don't see them until they either come out of the sun or come from around the tree and complete their circle. But they fly low and they fly right over at the top of my house. So Lou came out with a cameraman, and they were having me just tell my entire story. And they're filming away, and the cameraman's like, ooh, he says, battery dropped. I bet you guys have seen this.
Yeah.
If you guys, because you know what's coming. And he says, I got to go grab another battery. And he went out to the van and he grabbed a couple. And he came back in. The next one, he films with a fresh battery, 5 minutes, it drops to 0. And I've had, weird, like poltergeistish things happen in my house. Like the TV will turn on in the middle of the night in the living room. And, it used to scare us. And now we just get up and turn it off. Whoever's, less asleep gets up and turns it off. And we always say out loud, hey, just knock it off. Go back to bed.
Sounds like you, Irene.
Yeah, but I don't say knock it off.
Yeah. You say some more choice words.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they finally filmed my story, but not a single helicopter came over. And he was there the next day, and then they finished up, and then Lou is Cuban, and I said, well, we don't have a Cuban restaurant, but I said we got a great, like Tex-Mex style restaurant, just a couple blocks from here, downtown Garland. Why don't we go? And he said, yeah, be my treat. And we went, and we had a really nice meal. And when I talked about UFOs and about, and you could tell there was a line of a point where he felt comfortable talking. And then beyond that, where he would just say, well, I can't speculate. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we finished our meal. We went out, and we're going to part ways. I went to my car, and he went to his van. Now, his cameraman doesn't have his camera with him. It's all packed away. And I get to my car, and I'm unlocking it. And right up the main street of downtown Garland, where this restaurant is, there came a military helicopter, not 400 feet over the ground, and doing probably 200 miles an hour, right in the middle of the street, and goes buzzing by. And Lou just looks at me and nods his head and said, "Yeah, I get it."
God almighty. Wow. Well, they're just letting you know that they're still watching you. Wow, Terry, you know what? We've actually come to the end of the show. That was a very quick 2 hours. I just want to thank you so much for telling your story. I know we wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the other people's experiences that they shared with you, which I'll recommend people to pick up Terry's new book, Devil's Den, The Reckoning, which includes some material that he left out of the first book, Incident at Devil's Den, another good read, along with a lot of people who contacted him and tell him their own personal stories. So definitely check those out. Now, Terry, where can people find your books?
Amazon.uk, or for people stateside, Amazon.com. So it's only on Amazon. Incident at Devil's Den, I made an audiobook in my own voice. I could have paid a voice artist, but I really wanted it to be from me. Mm-hmm. So I did an audiobook, and that's on Amazon, of course. And I did the book, and then I also did a Kindle version. And then with the new book, Devil's Den, The Reckoning, I just have the book and the Kindle right now, and I'm actually working with a studio doing the audiobook, so that should be done sometime soon, I hope.
Oh, good.
Well, that'll be okay.
Well, I've read both books. I highly recommend them. They're great reads, and again, it I think it makes you ask more questions than it answers, but I think that's a good thing. It just, because of so many people, especially the second book, have had so many experiences similar to yours, and it just makes us look at this whole phenomenon with with more wide open eyes.
I hope so.
Well, Terry, thank you very much for coming on. We are running out of time here, so I thank you for being our guest, and good luck with the new book. I hope it really sells well for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Thank you, Irene.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. It's been lovely talking to you.
And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to another episode of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And we will catch you all next time. Have a good evening. Irene, we'll talk with you soon.
Okay. Bye, everyone.